All right, in this video, I'm going to go over the basics of Kontakt and specifically Kontakt 8, but this will probably work in future versions as well. And all we're going to do is walk through the interface, what the libraries look like inside Kontakt, what Kontakt is all about. So let's get right into it. So what is Kontakt exactly? Basically what Kontakt is a sampler. It was a way to load multiple samples, have them spread out onto a keyboard so that you could trigger those samples every time you pressed a key. So you could record the sound of a trumpet playing a concert pitch C, and then every time you play that C, you'd re-trigger that actual note that was recorded by a real trumpet player or whatever. Kontakt recently added things like synthesis, so you can actually do synthesis now inside Kontakt as well. But really at its heart, it is a sampler. Let's go to the library and get a handle on what the library is all about, because this is the most important thing when you are looking for sounds. So when you first pick up Kontakt, you might only have a few libraries in here. They're going to give you some with your purchase of Kontakt. I can't remember which ones come, like say if you just bought Kontakt. Those ones will be made by Native Instruments. There are many companies that are using Kontakt as the building blocks for their virtual instruments. And if you want to see what company actually made them, you can click over on brand and I can say, all right, let's just look at the libraries that were made by Native Instruments. So now all of these libraries here are made specifically by Native Instruments. I can also go over and look at ones by Audio Imperia and see libraries that they've made, and they make really great orchestral sounds. Same thing with Cinesamples. Most of my orchestral libraries that I use, I run inside Kontakt, but they're made by a third party, so some other company. As you see up at the top, you have the search field, and if you just start clicking on stuff, you can see that pops up in the search metadata. So once you've clicked on something by, say, Audio Imperia, you could then go and refine your search by sound type or character. So I'm going to click on sound type and I'm going to go bowed strings. Now I go click over on the right-hand side, which shows me the presets that are part of these metadata that I've chosen up at the top. And one of the beautiful things about Kontakt is it gives you a preview of what the patch sounds like. And when you're working with strings and stuff like that, it's not as important, but if I am to go and start looking for synthesizer sounds, that's when things can get really ambiguous. And so you want to narrow your search down to specific criteria and find only patches or sounds based on that criteria. As long as you're on the Instruments tab here, you're always going to be looking through the libraries and their basic presets. So let's load up some patches and show you what you might encounter. So if I click on Glaze 2, we could go over to sound type and we could instantly see, all right, this is the kind of patches that are in this library. So you can see we don't have any bowed strings in here. We don't have guitars and things like that, but we do have a lot of synthesizer patches. I could then also click on another one like Electric Keys Diamond, and you see that all we have in there is piano and keys. So if you're looking at your libraries, you're confused by what you're seeing, you can really narrow down very quickly what kind of sounds are in each library. Empire Breaks, well, that one is just drums and loops. So let's go over to Glaze 2. This is actually all the patches that come with Glaze 2 because all I've got is Glaze 2 in the search field up top. So now if I say, okay, I'm in Glaze 2 and I want to look for a synth pad, kind of those washy sounds. Now I can listen through a whole bunch of patches just by clicking on them, arrow down to hear the next patches. And I really like this one, so I'll put a star beside it. But let's say it's not quite what you're looking for. I could go over to character and I could see, okay, we've got airy, vocal, and process. That's all they've got for all of these patches. So let's go to a vocal one and see what kind of patches we get. Let's try this organized chaos one. Double click on it. Here that's adhering to the tempo that my project is at, hopefully. If I change the tempo, we'll see if that actually is the case, and it's not always the case. So let's set the tempo to 75 and see if it slows down. And it does. So if you ever see a Play Series instrument, that's going to be a special type of instrument that runs inside Kontakt that Native Instruments has created, and they've got a whole bunch of Play Series instruments. But if you look, I've got a playlist of videos just on Play Series instruments, and they're very powerful. There's some very cool features about them, so make sure you check that out as a separate watch. But let's leave that for now. Just understand that these are a very specific Native Instruments thing. But what about this little mini browser over on the left-hand side? And that's something new in Kontakt 8. This shows you all the patches that are in Glaze 2, which is great. There isn't a way to show categories and stuff like that like we would find in the full browser if you go over here and click on Glaze 2. So if I click on Glaze 2, I get all of their subcategories and the sound types and stuff like that. So if you're in the main view here, I could go and type in that sort of metadata myself. So I could go pad, and now I'm just looking at the pads for Glaze 2. So it's still possible to access metadata. I could go, all right, let's just look for a bass synth, and now just the bass ones pop up, or lead, and now the lead synths pop up. Right? So these are the different categories of sounds within Glaze 2. So now we're going to look at drums, because drums are a huge part of Kontakt and have always been a big part of Kontakt. Even though there are drum-specific virtual instruments, Kontakt has a lot of drums in it. And if you get any of the special collections, you will get things like Abbey Road drums. Vintage drummer and the 50s and 60s and 70s drummer, they're going to sound kind of similar. Modern drummer, you're going to get a modern sounding pop drum kit or rock drum kit. And so what we can do right here is go from sound type. Let's just go to drums, and maybe we'll keep it to Native Instruments specific for now. And now we can see the drum libraries that I have installed from Native Instruments. So let's just load up like a Abbey Road modern drummer. So up on top, we've got some default kits, and then we've got some other variations of this kit. So you can load up a new metal version of the Sparkle kit up top. And you'll also see that a lot of them say full and light. And full just means it's going to have a lot more samples. So way more samples loaded for the full kit versus the light kit. And if you're really not getting too carried away with your drums and you want to save resources, just click on the light kit. So I'm going to double click on the light kit. And if we look at it, we can see that this is taking 200 megabytes of RAM. If I go back and click on the full kit, this one is going to take a little longer. So the kit is twice as big. So I have 64 gigs of RAM. It's not a big deal for me to go for the full kit. So I usually just do that. The thing you should remember about these drum sets is they're all mapped out with the basic sounds at first. So you got your kick, your snare, your hi-hats, cymbals, ride cymbal, toms. And then if you go further up the keyboard, that's when you get into some of the exciting stuff with these drum kits. Like a flam, 2 hits on the snare, you got some rolls. So you can get really good at programming in these realistic drum beats when you're using some of the more detailed sounds that come out of these drum kits. Different hi-hats. You can hear how realistic those sound when you have that many samples versus just playing the open hi-hat sample that we have down at the bottom. And so they just keep going. You've got all these different toms and stuff. Maybe you're doing... That's an Abbey Road style kit. If we go back to our browser here, you're also going to find some electronic kits, some really great big percussion kits that have been around for a long time. Things like Damage. I absolutely love those huge toms and taiko drums and stuff like that that can be used for film soundtracks. And then we've got some more interesting kits like Butch Vig drums and 40's Very Own drums. So if I click on 40's Very Own drums, we're going to find some really interesting drum kits. And these ones come with beats built in. Okay, so I like this drum kit. Let's load this one right here. And the way these ones work is they're actually part of the Play Series. So I mentioned Play Series before as instruments. They also have Play Series for drums. And with the drum ones, they take a different approach than a lot of other libraries do. So here we can see on the keys, we can see the kit. and all of the different samples. There's 16 different samples. And so you can learn how to play them and find the samples that you want in there, or you can go up the keyboard and start using some loops. And then there's some variations as you go up. And if we click on the Play Series instrument itself and go to pattern, we can see that there's a whole bunch of different patterns. And sometimes they'll say things like fill, and it'll just be, one note will just be a fill. You can play between these different loops. And you can see each time I'm starting the pattern fresh. There's different ways to trigger that, to re-trigger patterns and stuff like that. And I have other videos on drums that I'll point you to in the description as well. So let's leave that for now, but just understand that I can take this little pattern right here and I can just drag it right onto my track. So now this pattern exists in my Cubase project. I can double click on it and I can edit it and I can change it up. So there it is right there. Now we should load up another instrument and maybe try something completely different. So let's go to some of the guitar instruments you might find in Kontakt if you have some of the guitar libraries installed. So let's go right to guitars, and we're going to look at specifically these session guitarists and session bassists, because these are going to help. Maybe you're not a guitarist, but you play piano. Let's try Electric Mint. Got a video on that one. Really great sounding electric guitar, and what it's doing is it's actually triggering patterns. So it sounds like somebody's actually playing these guitars. You can also play it like you would on a regular keyboard, or you can just hold down a chord and it will play this pattern for you. And you can also choose different chords. And let's try clean and see what happens. That sounds kind of neat. Let's try loading this one up. This little song idea is just two chords, C minor and C sharp major 7. And so I'm going to hold down a C minor chord. And you can see that it's changed the riff to my tempo. And then when I play the next chord, it's perfectly in tune. If I played another chord, there's a G7, back to C minor. And some of them will be a little bit more jazzy, depending on the type of patch that you've got. We're going to try this moody one out. We could try something with this library right here. We could click on playback and say, let's try taking it twice as fast. So we're going to take the tempo times 2. And that might just work with this little idea. Let's give it a try. Take it up the octave. Wow, it's sounding really good. Okay, let's make another Kontakt 8 track. We could do the same thing with bass. So this time we go back to my library. I'm going to click on bass. We'll go down to our session bassists. So we've got 3 session bassists installed here. I've got videos on actually all of these. And let's go to Icon Bass. The thing I should mention about these session guitar, session bass, is they're going to load loops for you that you trigger either by playing one note or playing a chord, but you also have these versions that say melody, and if you choose melody, you can play the notes in yourself. So sometimes you just want to play them, especially when it comes to bass. So make sure you watch my videos on that to see how to work with these kinds of libraries. This one might be cool. Let's load that one up, double click. So that one doesn't quite work because it's actually hitting a wrong note in there. So let me play a chord. if I play an actual chord instead of just a C sharp, so if I play a C sharp major chord, it knows to treat it differently than it would if I just played a C sharp, because the sound that the scale that this little loop is using is minor. Unless I tell it not to play something minor. And you know what's crazy about this is I don't even really need to play this again. I can take my electric mint chords and I can just drag them right down onto my bass. Let's hear that all together. So there's a lot of control you can have over those notes of the bass instruments, but that is a really basic way to work with the bass. So now what I want to do is talk about string libraries. And strings could include something like these Amati viola and the Stradivari violin, but I've got separate videos on those which I'll point you to because they are a little bit more complicated. But let's just pull up one of the simpler instruments that comes with a lot of the Komplete packages, which is the Session Strings and the Session Strings Pro. Let's go to cello, and we can go just modern or traditional. They don't sound too much different from each other. And if I go down the octave on my keyboard, I can control articulations or ways of playing the cello with these lower keys. So right now it's triggering a sustain. If I go to C sharp 1, it's triggering staccato. If I go to D1, it's triggering pizzicato. And if I go to D sharp 1, legato. So nice connected notes. We've also got some blank ones where you can load other articulations that come with the library. So I'm going to go to portamento because that's everybody's favorite. And now watch what happens when I play and trigger portamento. Sounds like the cello players have had one too many if you do it too much. So it sounds really nice if you switch between, say, legato and portamento. So that's using key switches inside Kontakt. And you'll find this in most realistic sounding instrument sample libraries. One thing I should mention is the library that comes with Kontakt. If you click on Kontakt here, you're going to get the factory library, and that one comes with a lot of patches. So if I go over to the right-hand side here, I can switch between the different banks, and we can see we've got acoustic, like dulcimer type instruments. So we've got the Santur. Really worth exploring these. They've been around for some time, but just some great stuff in there. So you go to reed instruments, you've got things like accordions, world instruments, mallet instruments, ideophones like the kalimba, the little thumb piano. I use that one for children's music all the time, Celesta. And then you've got also band instruments. So you've got some horns, got a great upright bass that they've had in there forever. And then they've got synths as well as some vintage electronic instruments that they've sampled. So those are the basic types of instruments that you might find in Kontakt, how to load them up, how to look for different sounds. And I've got other videos already on Play Series instruments. I'll point you to those in the description of the video. I've also got a video on the new things that come with Kontakt 8, like these combined presets, tools, leap, and using loops and one-shots inside Kontakt. Very cool stuff, and definitely something I'm going to do videos on in the future. Let me know what you want to see in other videos. Hope this was helpful, and if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and the bell, and I'll see you in the next video.